Welcome to Trust the Journey. I'm Melanie Curtis.
And I'm Jason Moledzki.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're here to create conscious connections, to grow and contribute through our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey.
Yep. If you guys want to find us on the wider internet, our handle on all the places is trustthejourney.today. That is our website as well. Find us on Instagram. Find us on, God, where else are we? So many places.
YouTube.
Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes. Yeah, all those places. Like, subscribe, share. That helps us reach more people. And certainly share directly the episodes that you think will help someone else specifically. If you want to join us in the Trust the Journey family, please do. That is where we come together in a more intimate way. It's a private Facebook group where you buy in on the Patreon, support us in any amount, and we'll get you into that group. And we would love to have you. So yeah, go to trustthejourney.today, scroll down, and any amount will get you in.
Thank you so much to all of our Patreon supporters. Without your support, this show truly couldn't happen. And I would like to welcome all of our new Patreon supporters. We've had quite a few new additions to the family lately, and we truly appreciate your membership and your support.
Yes.
Thank you so much for participating, and we welcome your participation in the family. Go ahead, speak up, share, be vulnerable, be open, and throw whatever you want in the pile of us. And we'll see what comes out.
Exactly.
I would also like to thank our editor, Kimberly Joy Voice, who manages our podcast editing and posting for us. She's just the best. We're going to fire this out to her as soon as it's done recording, and she's going to lickety-split whip it together and get it all ready to air so that everything goes up on time. And if you would like her to help you out as well, her email is kimberlyjoyvoice@gmail.com, and she'll be happy to help.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to follow Jay or myself individually, we also do stuff on our individual channels, which we invite you to share. Jay on Instagram is @Jason_Moledzki. And you can find all of my stuff at my website, melaniecurtis.com. So right on, team. Let's do this. Let's dive in. Today, we're talking about celebrations of life. We're talking about funerals and memorials. We just kind of want to dive in a bit deeper on this topic.
Heavy topic, right?
Yeah.
Typically a heavy topic because of the emotional experience related to grieving. Yeah. Let me ask, what was your first experience, if you don't mind, if you're willing to share,
with a good question.
With a funeral, memorial, or a celebration of life?
That's a good question. What was it? I think it was my grandfather, my mom's father. I remember my family coming over, and I don't remember feeling sad. I don't really remember understanding what was going on. But looking back, I understood once I got older and understood more about how human beings, at least in our society, process death and, I don't know, makes time and space. Gosh, I don't know. I was in third grade or second grade, I think. Something like that.
7 or 8 years old. Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, 7 or 8 probably.
What about you?
My first memorial service was for my father. I was 9 years old, and my father died in the U.S., in California, and my family lived in Toronto, Canada. And so his memorial service was held at a traditional funeral home, and there was no casket. There was a remains container, and I remember it being a small box set up on a table with a photograph of my father from his 20s, if I remember correctly, as clearly as a 9-year-old brain can recall, a 49-year-old brain. There was a picture of my father. I think it was the picture of him in the Air Force, where he was in his young, late teens, early 20s, and he had on his uniform, and it was a black and white photo, and the typical static image of a man or person passed, standing there at the front of the room. And it was a pretty like as a first experience for me, it was very confusing. Didn't really understand what was happening or why it was happening as a child. And I remember a lot of the people, especially my grandmother, was wailing. She was wailing, and my uncles had her by the shoulders, because she couldn't like hold her own weight up. She would just collapse to the ground and wail.
God.
So I remember this very emotional, huge outpouring of grief. And it was very scary for me as a child to see, and my grandmother in such a distraught state, and how there was all this tension in the air of people being silent and others being very loud, and how those contrasts, were so poignant, where, people being loud in a room where other people are being normal volumed or more loud, it's less contrasted. But when it's such a silent space, and then there's these huge expressions of grief, it scared the crap out of me.
Oh, I
as
believe
a kid.
it. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I know you kind of brought this topic to the table. I'm curious why. Like, what motivated it, or what was the inspiration behind wanting to talk about this today?
Well, I'm involved in the organization of Jimmy's Celebration of Life, and the event has always been a celebration of life for all the participants who are attending, and a celebration of all of our friends and who are no longer with us. So that particular event is one that's been happening since 2014. And this time around, the lead man, the head guy who put it all together, has become one of the people that's being celebrated. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation to compare the polarity of the traditional box funeral versus a celebration of life, and how there's all these versions in between, and every culture has their own version of how to relate to death. But I wanted to talk about our own experiences and how it has affected us each emotionally, how we approach those things. I know there's been a lot of passings in our community in the last few weeks, couple months. Quite a few people have passed on in a variety of different friends groups, families. So I thought it would be a pretty poignant topic for a lot of people to relate to.
Yeah, I'm actually going to a funeral service tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is I wasn't even thinking of that when you suggested this topic. But yeah, oh gosh, it's interesting, the difference when it's a shocking passing versus one that is maybe an older person that you kind of know is gonna go soon. Not that it changes the grief or anything like that, but it's almost like there's grieving that's done ahead of time, so there can be a higher potency of the emotion. I think, maybe not for some, I don't know. With that shock, the shock of someone leaving us earlier than you would have thought, from this plane, that is.
It's always that. I mean, I think there's a huge piece of that, right? Like when we're more prepared, if somebody's is aging or ill, and there's an obvious direction that's occurring towards that end of life, it's always, time is the big thing, right? Like it takes time for us to process these experiences. And things that are quite sudden, that jump up out of nowhere, accidents, unexpected passings.
Yeah.
They tend to rock us a little bit
Yeah.
harder, than because we all know life ends. Life begins, life ends, and that's just how it works. So, I think it's a little easier to stomach it, when grandma or grandpa passes at the end of a long, full life. It just doesn't seem as tragic as when people disappear midstream, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think that's the sort of intellectual part of it. You know what I mean? Where if an attachment is deep and strong, it can feel just as agonizing, even if it's expected. The only reason I say that is because I'm thinking about my own Gram, where it still feels like an open wound for me that
Yeah.
she's not here in this plane, even though I feel her with me. But yeah, that was really hard, even though it made sense at the time. You know what I mean?
Don't you think, so just to, continue wandering around this topic, exploring it.
Yeah.
I've had this experience, at least for myself, and tell me how you relate. We have the people that are close to us, mother, father, sister, brother, immediate family, people that we've had a bonded relationship with, for positive or not,
Mm-hmm.
And those tend to be, no matter what, a when somebody leaves who's close to us or has been close to us for a long period of time, there's a pretty solid shake. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
shaken. It rocks us in whether it's a positive or a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
It upsets our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And then people that we have less intimate bonds with, people we may have met in passing, we don't know that well, or haven't had a great influence on our lives, we don't tend to have that same emotional, upset that occurs. But there's a surprising thing that I've seen, which is sometimes there's people we've had very little connection with who we find ourselves very upset when they pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just a curiosity that I just have noticed in my own life experience that, sometimes a friend or a family member passes on and there's a sadness, there's a sense of loss, a space that's left behind that was filled by that person. And, our emotional relationship to that is really hard to anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, gosh, if I'm thinking about the different versions of honoring people after they pass, one of the things I immediately think of is Jonathan's funeral, and how I was one of the people to get up and speak, and how I could cry thinking about it.
Yeah.
Man, it was really hard for me to feel like I could ever do him any justice. Like I was like, oh God, nothing I could ever say, nothing I could ever, it's like terrified that it wasn't going to be good enough, And of course, knowing that just getting up there and showing up at all was all that mattered. That was the brave part. And I feel very brave that I did that. And I feel like I honored my friend. But that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, was getting up to speak at his funeral, because of how much I love him. Excuse me. I'm really tired today, so I'm more emotional.
You're more beautiful today than ever.
Thank you. Yeah. And then the other way that we honored him was we did an ash dive in Dubai, where he was living at the time of his death, and he loved it there. He really loved it there. And so we wanted to honor him by doing something at the World Meet in 2012. And we did this awesome canopy flock where I carried his ashes and got to release them over the palm and just do this beautiful with his teammates flocking behind me and him. And that was wonderful. You know what I mean? That was even though I was jumping Billy's gear that wasn't even my gear, but I felt totally fine and safe jumping it. I was like, couldn't get the removable slider off. It was flapping all around and slowing me down. I was like all this kind of little stuff that kind of went wrong, quote unquote, but none of it fazed me. I totally was just like, it was a much more interestingly positive. Not that his funeral and celebration of life in the funeral sense wasn't positive, because it was at that time when I was more in my high potency of grief and felt that pressure like I just described. Whereas for some reason, I didn't feel that same pressure on this skydive. I was like, they're going to have to just follow us. And I'm like, I'm going to go straight. I'm going to do the plan. But you know what? They're just going to have to follow us, and that's it. And it was really wonderful. I released him over the palm, and I have this incredible image of him. It like the puff of his ashes over the palm, over the city of Dubai with my arms. And because it's like from my GoPro, from my vantage point, it's just like I've shared it like once with a specific kind of group of people but I haven't shared it publicly really at all. I haven't posted it online or anything like that. It feels like, I don't know, just very private, but it's this really wonderful image that makes me really happy that it exists. Like, that helps me remember that moment. Not that I think I would forget it, but that felt really honoring. And I mean, this is kind of weird and gross. I don't know if people will understand this, but when you're releasing ashes in flight, it flies all over the place. It almost always gets all over you. And so one of the funny things was he was like on me, in my shirt, in my like bra, like all over me, because it just, and it was just a really funny thing at the end of the day where I was like, all right, let's, just kind of having a laugh with him as I, took a shower and sort of, we just had that funny, like, final moment. Not that it's final, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
I mean, that's a vastly different expression of how to celebrate.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, this is kind of why I wanted to have this conversation is, at least in my life experience so far, the culture that I was born into in North America has this very structured approach to death as being a finality. It's final. It's painful.
Yeah.
It's something we don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It is wrapped in like a cloak of darkness. And these are all personal impressions, right? These are just my own, what I encountered. And in the skydiving world and the base jumping world, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
like there's this like, okay, well, if our families need to have a, typical religious or traditional style funeral or memorial, we tend to go, okay, we'll follow through with a cultural tradition and we'll perform that, but then we're also going to celebrate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then there's all the different ways, and the one that you're describing here with Jonathan, it's incredibly honoring, right? You're getting a group of somebody's best friend's family together, taking their remains, going to one of their very favorite places, which in our circumstances is the sky itself.
Right.
And freeing though it's the ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it's truth of who we are, is that we come from nothing and we go back to nothing, and releasing that, those remains and that energy into the sky to truly, fly free.
Yeah.
It's a term we hear a lot in our cultures. It's just fly free. And it's a beautiful freeing of energy, where like it really just like sets it free, and like let's be free of this thing that we're holding, which is an attachment, right? It's an idea, and let's just go like, and just send it into the ether.
Yeah, and another thing just to point out about that experience with Jonathan's celebration is that we also, at least in the Sky family, this is pretty typical, but we did this in both instances for Jonathan, where we got t-shirts made and everyone was a part of it. We organized multiple jumps at Skydive Elsinore as well. So we did multiple things. And in Dubai, it was really great. Like, there was another series of t-shirts. They were bright and yellow and bold and beautiful. And, I'm sure you remember. And, and it was just wonderful. His family was there, and it just felt really good to be together honoring him in a celebratory way. Like, it really, I think those things are very important, those types of rituals, so that it's not just grief and pain, so that there is an actual punctuation mark and a highlighter on the beautiful wonderfulness of this person we love so much, whomever it might be.
Did you get one of those patches with the snaps like that we made, which had the JT on them, and it was made out of webbing and it had some snaps so you could put it on the diagonal of your rig so that he would come with you on every jump? Yeah, I think those are awesome.
Yeah, totally.
I've got a couple of them on my rigs, and they just become part of my equipment. It's just there all the time. Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to talk about something else that's an interesting. There's some there's always heaviness and lighthearted mixed together in this whole grief experience, and all this whole life experience. Let's be honest, right?
Yes.
So the whole life thing doesn't change, right? When it ends, it's still just as hilarious and just as painful every step of the way. So we have this very classic phrase that's been used within the sky community for decades, which is blue skies, black death.
Mm-hmm.
And it is generally embodied in kind of an old school way. I've seen it going back as far now. I would love it if anybody who has more historical accuracy would chime in anywhere in comments on Instagram, or send us a personal message and give us more detail of where the roots of the blue skies, black death comes from. But it's been represented with a skeleton wearing a skydiving rig, and it's in context of saying blue skies, like the incredibleness of the open blue sky and the reality that we're all going to die are intertwined and unavoidable, and both of them are beautiful, and in as heavy as and how as emotional as passing and dying can be, black death.
Mm-hmm.
It's contrasted by the blue sky and the same richness of emotion, of fantastic celebration that can only be realized with those polarizations, with those perspectives of each other.
Yeah. Oh, God, I agree with that completely. It is so fascinatingly true in my life experience that yin yang, that polarity of like the high highs and the low lows seem to be present.
Yeah.
It's just like, whoa, man. Yeah. Anyway, you have more to say. Please go on.
Oh, I was really just I've seen, I think in the younger generations, skydiving has changed a lot over the years. And the Blue Skies Black Death, um, BSBD, acronym has kind of, it's not as forward in the culture as it used to be. It used to be very poignant, like it was kind of pushed front and center, kind of like the Harley Davidson culture, live free or die,
Right.
kind of like this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. And it is still true to this day. There's nothing has changed about it. Like we go into the sky and we push our lives to the limit or past, and we accept that sometimes they go past the limit, and that the inevitable outcome of that is death.
Mm-hmm.
But it's worth the risk, which is the same thing as that live free or die kind of idea of the Harley Davidson or the motorcycle culture of like, look, we're not going to not live our lives because we're afraid of crashing our bikes. We're not going to not live our lives because we're afraid that our parachute might not open.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we're going to go and do this to make sure that we're living our lives. And we know that at some point the parachute's not going to open or the bike's going to crash or that we're just going to die. And in the meantime, we want to celebrate. And so I just wanted to kind of put a circle around that and highlight it for any younger generations that might be missing out on the value of the Blue Skies Black Death motto, and give it some life.
Something to acknowledge the realities of that. You know what I mean? That's a different conversation, but to acknowledge the realities, the harsh realities, in a way prepares us more for when those inevitabilities do come forth. And this is sort of dovetailing off of what you shared in the last Walking Each Other Home episode about Jimmy and how you felt more prepared. You felt that's like part of your experience this time around. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I'm really just, in the curiosity space and just exploring. So,
well, I'm curious about something actually. The difference, you wanted to look at the difference between celebration of life, funeral, memorial. What do you see as the difference between a memorial and funeral? Like, I don't know necessarily what those distinctions might be.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine. Excuse me for a second, because I was talking to a good friend of mine, Danny Wheeland, the other day, and we were relating just about Jimmy's passing and talking about JVH, which was a huge figure in his life. It was, like a father figure to him. And when he passed, it was a big deal. And he was really, really broken up. And he told me that he went I think it was with Jimmy. I may be wrong in quoting this, but he went to JVH's funeral in drag.
Oh,
because JVH, because he was honoring JVH, because JVH loved to show up in drag, but he never did that any other part of his life. So they basically just were like the two dudes showing up at the funeral and being like, "Hey, what's up?" Like in like the traditional family funeral, and there's a couple of weirdo friends in like
that's a sitcom or a romantic comedy if I ever heard it.
Totally Wedding Crashers type.
Exactly.
Funeral crashers. There's some such good comedy in it.
Oh, there definitely is. I mean, God, the black, dark humor that is a chronic, constant, but that's part of a funeral and part of a memorial or a celebration of life is you're talking about memories. You're sharing memories and stupid shit you did and funny stories and all good, deep and meaningful stories too. But there's a lot of laughs at funerals too, in my experience, through that storytelling and through that sharing of, oh, remember when they did this or that or this,
So I'll have to be honest here. I went to two funerals early on in my life, both of my parents, right? And I was still a child at both of them, 9 and 12 years old. And that was it. After my mom's funeral, I was like, I'm not going to another one of these, like the traditional put on a suit and tie, stand there somber and, listen to somebody that, try their best to memorialize. I had such pain, like my own personal trauma related to my relationship to losing people meant that I couldn't enter that space again.
Yeah.
I couldn't go.
Makes sense.
And I have never been to another funeral or memorial service in the traditional like funeral home setting for the rest of my life since then. I apologize to my grandparents when they passed because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it. There was no way. I was like, my family came knock like, hey, you're coming or what? And I'm like,
I think that speaks to a very important point that grief is very personal. And I think people really do need to do what's right for them. I believe in that very strongly as it relates. I believe very strongly in showing up when I can. And I say I because this is, again, my personal feeling. I feel convicted around that. But for example, when Jim Hickey passed, I was just devastated and I could not go. I was like, Jim will understand. He knows I love him. I love him. It is too much for me right now because of all the other things I had in my life. And I was just so in such a grief-stricken state that the right thing for me to do in that case was to grieve him in my own way, away from that service.
Yeah. I think for me, there's something in that same sense of like, if it's a traumatizing experience, that it's not going to be a healing experience. It's only going to be more triggering or more damaging. It's going to just like open up a wound that isn't healed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then I haven't personally, I haven't been able to like reapproach that. I've been to plenty of celebrations of life. I've been on multiple ash dives, lots of different ways of celebrating the passing of friends and loved ones. But I've never been able to get myself to, kind of walk into that space or re-enter that space that was so painful for me as a young person.
Yeah,
so
that's fair. Yeah. That's totally fair.
I'm going to switch it up.
Yeah.
That was kind of heavy. I'm going to tell you the story of my worst skydive ever.
Okay.
So I may have told this story before. Actually, I've told this story many, many times before.
Yeah.
I have told the story to groups of people in different settings, and you have to understand the context. The fellow who had passed, his name was Wes Harberts. He was a popular skydiver at Skydive Arizona in the time when I lived there around the year 2000, local. And he eventually opened up a drop zone in Skydive Tahoe and operated a plane there and did skydiving. And he brought an aircraft out to Burning Man and he set up camp at Burning Man. And he was a lively fellow, loved to party, liked to have a good time, was always getting into trouble. And he went in on a skydive at his drop zone. He rode in a spinning malfunction, right? He did not cut away from a malfunction parachute and rode it all the way to impact. And from what I've been told, he was kicking and screaming the whole time, just, going down fighting kind of thing, but never got rid of it or couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
Didn't get a reserve out. Anyways, I was at Burning Man. This is a celebration of life story. I was invited. Asia, if you're listening, thank you for the invite, and I hope you appreciate my interpretation of this story. Asia, his partner, invited me to participate in an ash dive for Wes. And she was pulling together a group of people to get together on a load. It's the we had a pack 750, takes about 13 to 15 jumpers, depending on what altitude you're at, kind of thing. So I think we were putting together a 13 way, and Asia had asked me to be involved. I didn't really want to be on this jump. I had other things on my mind. Wes and I had kind of an embattled relationship. Like, he was a friend, but we weren't really close, and he kind of rubbed each other wrong a couple times, and we're like, I don't know if I'm the guy to be on this dive or not, but
right.
I'm one of the more experienced people here, so I'll go ahead and go on the dive. And okay. And then, the group's pulling together, and there's a few other key friends. Harley Payne, Jackson's dad, was one of the people on there. Jason J. Bird was on there. Asia herself, and then a few other people were being gathered. And it turns out I'm the most experienced jumper, and the group really needs some organization. So I end up starting to okay, well, why don't you guys be the base and build, guiding the dive and figure out who should go where. And having been on ash dives before, it requires certain poise and preparation, and it's emotional, and there's complications about opening the bags and deploying and the things. So everything's running behind schedule. It's getting dragged out about an hour and a half later than it's supposed to be, and it's running up against sunset.
Oof.
And we are operating on a runway with no lights. So we have to be done before we get to a certain legal twilight. And the pilot of the aircraft is Ray Farrell. And he was getting antsy and getting irritated because we're running up against his time limit.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be flying in the dark. And by the time we finally get out to the airport, it's a long shuttle out there. Everybody's making their way to the plane. Everybody's getting on board, getting ready. It's all way behind. And Ray, he yells back, and he's in a pissy mood. He's like, somebody is lagging. Somebody's way behind, right? They're way behind and trying to get to the plane. Ray's like, tell that MF to hurry the fuck up,
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, this is a memorial dive. This is an ash dive. We can relax a little bit. And the guy you're yelling at is a double amputee.
Oh, gosh.
It takes him time to get here because he doesn't have any legs.
Oh, my God.
Right? So there's this humor of it's a shit show to begin with.
Yeah.
Things
Everyone's
are running.
Freaking out.
Everybody's freaking out.
Yeah, high intensity.
And people are hungover or altered because they've been having a day or whatever. And we take off and we start climbing altitude. And Ray hollers back, you might not get full altitude. We're running at daylight. And I'm like, well, we're doing an ash dive. We need enough altitude to put together a 13-way and deploy an ash bag and separate and everything. And so we're at about 7,000 feet. He yells, jump run.
Whoa.
So that's a pretty short exit altitude for formation skydiving pass for a group that big, especially a hodgepodge out of a small door aircraft. I was going last. I was sitting next to Ray to be communicator, and I know I can dive fast and get to the group fast. And we had some people in the base. Anyways, about 7,500 feet, exit. People start piling out. Whoever is second to last trips and falls flat on their face in the door and hammers the floor, just slams into the floor of the aircraft. And I'm right behind them. I'm like, shake my head. I'm like, oh shit! And I just dive over top of them out the door. God. I'm like, let's get out of this airplane. And I dive out the door looking for, since I'm not last diver, I should be seeing a 3 to 5, maybe a 6-way.
Yeah, something.
Something ahead of me.
Yep.
I see 11 one-ways. There are 11 people around the sky. All over the place. 11 one-ways, right? So there's 11 people in all different levels everywhere. And suddenly something goes whoosh past me. And I'm like, what the hell? And then I look up behind me and the plane's diving and the last person has gotten out. And I look and I'm like, where is Asia and where's Harley? And I zoom down and I grab Harley and I dragging him towards Asia and closing a 3-way group. And I believe Asia had the bag.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at her and I'm like, open the bag. Yeah. And then I look at my altimeter and we're at 2,500 feet.
Oh my God.
Exactly. Right.
Terrifying.
And everybody's building. There's people coming from everywhere building.
Ditters?
oh my God, it's the worst skydive of my life.
Oh my God,
right?
I believe you.
It's 2,500 feet.
Now getting it, why it
In
is.
the middle, everybody's still encroaching. We have not released an ash bag. And it's break off time. And it is like, we need to be pulling parachutes. Meow, meow, meow.
Oh my
and
God.
I just look around and just drop a pilot chute.
Good
I'm
for
like,
you.
This is over. I am sending the game over signal. And I drop a pilot chute. I'm the highest one open at about 2,200 feet.
Oh my God.
And I'm on my Velo 79. And we're somewhere over Burning Man. And I'm just like furiously mad. I'm like, I didn't want to go on this skydive in the first place.
Oh
right?
my God.
And I'm like, gosh, fuck.
For those people listening that are not skydivers, I just want to make sure you understand why I am like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Jay is describing something that is incredibly low and dangerous for that size of a group. And it's a great story of links in the chain. This link, this link, this link, and it goes into something, can turn into something really bad. It's lucky that, did anyone get actually hurt on that jump?
No. So everybody who was alive on that jump landed safely.
Nice. Good.
Wes,
lessons learned. Oh no,
Wes Harbert, who was in the bag, who was supposed to be released into the sky, went in a second time.
Oh my God. Are you fucking serious?
Wes, who loved chaos and was the kind of guy who liked to skydive on acid.
Oh my God.
Went in at Burning Man the second time.
There it is. That's appropriate. There you go.
Right?
Wow.
And I just laughed because when we opened and I saw this, I saw the baggie go by and I'm like, oh, you got to be fucking kidding. Boom. Into the desert floor. And I'm just like, whatever. This is ridiculous.
Well, and I think that also speaks to something about like, it's very difficult for things. I think about myself being like, oh my God, I'm so distraught over saying the wrong thing at Jonathan's thing. But that's the youth of myself at that time, like not getting that, fuck, shit happens. Yeah. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be super messy. And it's like that releasing, that surrendering to however the honoring sort of comes to pass is also healing, is also part of the healing, I think, is just to be like surrendering to
the chaos.
The
perfect synchronicity.
Well, letting go of that intensity of the finality. You know what I mean? That super heavy part of like, heavy, so heavy. This is the last chance you're ever going to be able to do anything. You know, like it's so heavy. When it's just false. It's not even close to the last. I've honored Jonathan countless times. I've written about him a bunch of times. I've told stories. I'm talking about him today. He influences my decisions in amazing, beautiful ways. Like I'm constantly honoring him. And I'm just using him as an example because I've talked about him the most today. But like, it doesn't have to be that heavy. I think that's something that I've learned as a person maturing through my experiences of these perceptible losses, that it doesn't have to be so heavy, you know?
It doesn't. Let me close that story by the key piece at the end there is that the rules at Burning Man are you're not allowed to land in the city. You have to land outside the city, right? Unfortunately, the bag went in outside the city. It didn't create anything dangerous to anybody. I personally was pissed, turned and headed straight for camp and broke all the rules because I don't follow rules very well. First time for that, I don't know. I don't follow rules well. So I did a big swoop, and I did a big diving turn and I swooped across all the city and through everything. And then I popped up and I landed right next to our camp, right in the intersection in the middle of town. Jonathan style, Jay style.
Classic,
and I put it down right where I'm like, I'm best there is at this. I'm going to put it right where I want. Put it right down, and I got hugged by two naked girls. Somebody handed me a martini, and then the next thing I hear from across the camp is Brian Burke over there going, "You're fucking grounded. You'll never jump here again." Blah, 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 blah. Like just this. And I'm just like, you have no idea what I just went through. And the irony of it all.
Oh my
God.
God.
Oh God.
Insane. It's, hey, at least you tried. I think about that story and I'm like, Asia, she was doing her best
to
honor him. You know what I mean? She's asking you, maybe doesn't know the details, the situation, the vibe between you guys, and that just speaks volumes of how different one's experience with these celebrations of life, with organizing them. I mean, God, again, I think of, you mentioned organizing, and I organized the Formation Skydive where we did Jonathan's letters, did JT in the sky.
And they're beautiful.
Yeah, it came out amazing. And it's funny because like some of the best skydivers in the world, if not the best skydivers in the world, are on this jump. And so I want everyone to hear this because it's totally dope. I'm actually totally proud of this moment in my life. But I knew the not so good people on the jump too. And I knew where to put them in order so that it could be controlled, so that these people that were not necessarily as good, that I couldn't trust to necessarily be there, were going to fucking be there. And so one of the best skydivers in the world was like, no, let's just do it like this, just free flight. And I'm like, no. I told one of the best skydivers in the world, I'm like, no, we're doing it this way. These grips, this person here, no. It was awesome. And he stepped back and he was like, got it. And it was great. It was a moment of respect and a moment of ownership. But, that was a bit of my needing to control that piece of the celebration as well. So it's that elevated emotion, that high potency of response, all those kinds of things.
I did an ash dive a couple years ago with my good friend Shane Dunn.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on the Troll Spire. It's one of the most iconic base jumps in the world.
Cool.
It's the spirit in Norwegian. It's the spirit, like the spire of the church.
Oh, cool.
So it is the church itself. Like the locals look at that and they're like, that is the temple, and it stands this little tiny thing. And it is incredibly terrifying to climb up on it because there's just this little rock pile that's over 5,000 feet up, dangling in space.
Oh my God.
So it's really treacherous and you have to walk out on this little tiny rock, and the whole thing is, the first time you ever go there, it's just gut-wrenching. And I went there with Shane and he surprised me. He didn't tell me. We get there and he pulls out two hands and I'm like, what's in your hands? And he opens one hand and there's a bag of ashes. He opens the other hand and there's a couple little hits of paper, a couple of squares of paper. God. And I'm like, he's like, this is Ted, and this is Ted's acid, and we're going to take this and this with us on this jump. And I'm like,
oh, man.
What? Oh, crap.
Oh, my God. As you're out on the edge.
So, like, we're geared up, and we're about to walk to the edge. And so it's literally like rip the piece of acid in half, put each of it, put some on our tongue, pour the ashes in our hands, and then do our count and launch off the side and fly next to each other, celebrating and cheering. And it's a minute long jump. It's huge. You're just, and partway through the jump, you open your hands and let the ashes go.
That's cool.
And at the same time, feel the acid start to kick in. And then parachute opens with the hardest 180. Hey Ted, showing up to just give a little spank in the ass, and go have a beautiful landing and spend the afternoon in the meadow by the river, just enjoying life and nature and the best of times,
Yeah.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah, God, I'm really on the camp of do what you need. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't bother me in the slightest to show up. And I obviously have different experiences. I don't have the traumatic experiences in my youth that you do about kind of traditional services. I certainly don't enjoy them. I don't like them, but I feel good about showing up if a person wants to have that. If I
Agreed.
can, and supporting the living. Like, I feel like a big reason we do this is to support the people closest to the person who has gone. And sometimes that's us and we're the ones being supported. And sometimes we are the ones doing the supporting of the person who is most affected and most in pain.
Absolutely. The whole grieving process is a pretty, like you said, it's deeply personal, right?
For sure.
I know my own experience with my father took me 20, 25 years to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And my mom literally was like 25 years later. I'm like, I think I'm good with this now.
Yeah.
Like 25 years later. So
Yeah.
if you've had a passing in your life and you're still feeling rocked by it, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. It takes some time.
It takes time for sure. Yeah. And who knows? I think some people subscribe to that it's never gone, that it's never healed. And that's okay too. Maybe it heals in a different life. Maybe, yeah, who knows? I don't know the answer to that at all. I just know that if there's still grief there, that's normal. And if this at the same time, it's because I think some people also can feel almost guilty when their grief subsides, when they're happy again, when they're not feeling sad.
Ooh.
There can be some guilt over that. That's like, if I loved them enough, I would feel bad longer or something like that.
Especially in a partnership, right?
Yeah.
If the partner or loved one, a married couple, somewhere where you're like, oh, this is my other half, kind of thing. When is it okay then to be whole again?
Exactly
or to then also have room to allow other people into your life
100%.
in whatever capacity that means, and that same thing. I'm like, for me, losing my dad, then when am I going to allow somebody else to be like a father figure to me? Kind of thing. That same thing. It's like, maybe not for a very long time, because I'm like, that space is still being held by that person, even though they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's not until, come to an agreement or an easement within ourselves that space is always going to be held by that person, and it's never going to be gone.
Yeah.
Or that we come to a peace with it, and then there's room for others to, or not, not, whatever our personal journey is.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of a minor detail, seemingly minor detail, but it's another thing that sort of touches this conversation, is the typical thing of creating photo montages and videos honoring the people and trying to, I remember, and again, I'm only using Jonathan because it was one of the more significant experiences in my life where I was sort of in charge of a lot of stuff and one of the most affected. And anyway, I remember being like, grateful to have a job to do that I could channel my energy into. And at the same time, fearing, am I going to leave someone out, or is it not going to be good enough? Like constant sort of judgments around, fears around that type of thing. And it's like I wasn't giving myself the grace that I would give everyone else 10, 15, 100 fold. You know what I mean? The whole total non-judgment of, it's do what you need to do and it's all going to be perfect. It's all going to be messy. It's all, some beautiful, perfect organic moments will happen, but you don't know that. And when you're not as experienced, and so back then I didn't have access to that, but now I would hope that I would have access to a bit more grace for myself and allow that, you know what I mean? And I hope that in sharing that, people listening, if you're in that experience, I hope you consider or at least attempt to give yourself more grace.
That's a really powerful sentiment, and I completely agree with you 100%. It's so important to remember that there's no finality to anything, right? Like, we're going to have dinner conversations where we bring up our past friends and loved
Yeah.
ones and talk about the
Yeah.
memories or the stupid things or their pain in the ass parts of them or whatever it is. And those are going to go on well beyond a funeral, memorial, a
For sure.
celebration of life. They're not only going to happen in this, container that's we're creating specifically to serve that purpose, and those containers are powerful, right? Like, they're an emotionally safe space. They're exactly what we talk about all the time of trying to create for ourselves is like, okay, we're going to create an emotionally safe space specifically to allow grief, joy, connection, remembrance, all the different things that are related to our connections to a person to occur in those environments in a way where they are being held and we are holding that space for each other. And so I think it's a great reminder even for me to tell myself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, this is one thing I want to make sure I say before the end. And just this came up. And again, Jonathan being the example today that I'm using. I just gave a led a session for the UK Skydive the Expo conference. And I talked a lot about mentorship and, the whole life lessons from a professional skydiver thing. Anyway, a big part of that talk, I talked about Jonathan and his influence on me as a mentor and as a friend and with encouragement and stuff like that. But I normally think to myself when I'm considering sharing about him, I think to myself how I have to work in that he's dead. And I was didn't this time. I was like, I don't need to share that he's dead. People figure it out if they not, but that's not a necessary point in this part of what I'm sharing. I'm sharing about mentorship and encouragement and sponsorship and stuff that he helped me with and friendship. And it didn't actually fit to share that he had died. So I didn't. And that was a first for me where I was like, I don't actually need to. I can share about this other cool thread in our friendship that is, part of his living on through me and through my sharing. But it was cool. It was like a cool thing where I was like, oh, cool. I don't actually need to always talk about how he's not here anymore.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we think about most of our influential persons in history, I mean, we know that they're not. We know Martin Luther King isn't here anymore.
Right.
But
totally.
His words are even more impactful now that he's gone. And you don't have to say, the deceased or past or whatever. Right. You can just say the words or quote the intention or reference the value, the experience, any of that. It doesn't have to be. That's great. That's great.
It was job, cool. Mel. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting evolution. It is this relationship to those that are not in this world anymore. You know what I mean? Those that are physically gone. But
I'm going to intentionally try that in the context of when people or when a certain, if the context of a share was to say, oh yeah, well, my friend Ted always does this,
right?
And just leave it like that.
Yeah, just leave it.
Yeah,
totally.
That's great.
Totally.
Carry them, keep them here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it felt honest. You know what I mean? It didn't whereas historically it would have felt like, oh, I'm not sharing this big thing. And if people find out that I'm not sharing this big thing, they'll be like, whoa, why didn't she share this big thing? But then I was like, no, I don't need to share that thing right now. It's all good. Any other final thoughts, my friend? Finality.
This is the last time that I have to share a thought about something.
It's the last chance you're ever going to get to share.
Yeah, I'll share something else actually.
Do
Like
it.
last week, we had a memorial for Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
We went out to the landing area for the jump, and we got a permit, and we dug a hole, and we had a memorial burn, and we released some of his belongings back into the world of energy.
Cool.
And we had some silence, and we had some crying, and we had some laughing, and we had some connecting, and we had all those things. And it was a small little group. And I was challenged by it. I was angry. That morning I woke up, wrong side of the bed, just super frustrated and wanting to be short-tempered with everybody. And like my emotional state was really charged. And I actually went, to Julie and to explain that I'm really irritable right now.
Yeah,
Because
good.
I'm sensing my level of irritability is incredibly high, and I don't want to just bite somebody's head off or bark at somebody because I'm feeling challenged. I'm going to express that I'm feeling challenged and let everybody know that, so that then I can help figure my way through that.
Love it.
And I was challenged because I'm going to have to now relive a bunch of this emotional trauma that has to do with this. And so it was part of the catalyst why I wanted to talk about this show, is that we know going to a memorial, funeral, or a celebration of life, or a dash dive, or whatever, a dinner, anytime that we're going to go and we're going to put the topic of a lost loved one, cared for one important person on the table as this is why we are here. It means we're going to open up that wound and we're going to be in it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. Like it came out as irritability and anger in my situation, but it can come out in any number of ways. Any emotion is can possibly be the way that it gets expressed, but it's uncomfortable, painful, scary, challenging. Pick a word, any word to describe. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Because it just isn't a fun idea to go like, let's go clean out that wound. I don't know about you, but when I'm hurt, the idea of cleaning my
peroxide
wound
doesn't feel good.
Doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But afterwards, this is the key thing, right? Like, yeah, I'm not excited about peroxide and a scrub brush in my open wound. That's going to hurt, But the end result is I'm going to heal.
Yes.
Because of it. We are going to heal through these actions that we take together. So I wanted to leave this connective encouragement to embracing the suck, opening up the emotional spaces, letting each other know that we're not happy about it, that we don't like it, that it's hurting, that it's painful, that we miss each other. Opening up that vulnerable space, using the connectivity, knowing that it's a vulnerable container for these things, and engaging them with the let's do this together. Let's walk each other home type of approach.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful sentiment to close this one on. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us through these kinds of conversations, for everyone listening, for being in the kind of suck in this topic, being willing to listen through and hopefully hear insight for yourselves and the people that you care about that are still around, that are maybe in this type of pain.
I'd like to thank everybody who has personally reached out over the last few weeks to send messages of support, of appreciation, of gratitude for the podcast that we've already done, to reflecting, for just reaching out to support me personally. It's been so powerful to constantly know and feel surrounded by love all the time, and just this sense of nurture and of being held by such a beautiful, loving community. So I wanted to acknowledge and thank everybody for that. It's really been,
Yeah.
been felt. And I think I'd like to close this and say thank you to everybody for listening. If you would like to support our show, it would be truly appreciated if you would become a Patreon member. You can go to trustthejourney.today, scroll down to the bottom of our webpage, and there's a big red button that says donate now, and jump on Patreon and drop a couple dollars, what you would spend on a coffee, or as much as you would like. It will truly help with the costs and productions of this program, and it will also get you membership into the Trust the Journey family, where we continue to hold that safe, emotional space for everybody to share in.
Yeah, we invite you guys who are listening into that space. It's a brave thing to step into a space like that. Just like you're listening to a show like this, it's an interesting next step to step into a community where there's engagement happening. So yeah, if you're considering it, feel free to reach out, drop us a personal message if you're unsure. But yeah, we welcome you and just invite you. And we know, and I just want to say that, and I know Jay said it, but that space is safely held because it is held by us.
And if you're supporting through financial isn't what you can do, please, share our episodes with other people. Like and subscribe on any one of the feeds on Patreon on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube. Follow, subscribe, make comments, like episodes, share episodes. All of those things really help us to get the word out to others. And if you know somebody that might be hurting and could use to hear this episode, say, hey, this might help them along. Pass it along. This is how we support each other. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Instagram is where we're most active on social. So that's trustthejourney.today for the show. Jay is at jason_moledzki, and I am at melaniecurtis11. But yeah, guys, we love you so much. Thank you for everything. Any final thoughts, my friend?
That's it.
Love you.
Love you. Thanks for listening.